Hi, and welcome again to Coffee with Craig, i.e., with me. And I do these regularly. Sometimes they're about topical things, sometimes they're just about ideas to sort of stimulate your thoughts and have a think about things. And I'll take some of your questions as when we move on in a moment. And do put your questions in now in advance. But obviously there's loads of things you like about me to talk about topically, and we might mention a couple of those towards as we move through it. But I'm kind of like to choose a theme. And one of the themes I was thinking about today, and it's kind of been on my mind a bit, and I thought I'd see what your thoughts are and see what you have to say about these things. But it's about how kind of the way religion kind of thinks that all us mediums are in league with the devil. And I thought I'd just start off by talking a few things about my thoughts about kind of the way mediumship relates to things like, particularly to Christianity, actually, because the most vocal people against mediumship are often Christians. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about that first. If you've got any questions, particularly on this topic, it would be useful. Obviously, I don't mind later on talking about other stuff as well, but particularly if you've got any thoughts about this, of if you've experienced anything bad with it. Because, when I first got involved in mediumship in particular, I went to see, I started to go and see one or two mediums, and I went to see particularly Doris Stokes, who I'd had the private reading with before. So I went to see some of her shows. And outside, there's all these Christians protesting, and they're putting all the banners up, and they're giving you leaflets, and they're telling you don't go in, don't go in because the devil's in there. This woman is in league with the devil. And of course, it put a lot of people off. Particularly if you're new to it all. And I thought, well, I'm not listening to all this nonsense. I'm going to go in. And it was a fabulous evening, but it was disruptive. It was disruptive and it caused problems, and people came into the audience and started shouting out halfway through Doris's demonstration. And, this just wasn't on. It just wasn't on. I thought that, whatever your beliefs are, it doesn't mean you can disrupt another group of people's beliefs as such, although the whole idea of mediumship is to dispel belief and try to give some real proof. And I think that's the nub of it in many respects, isn't it, with Christianity? The heart of it is that Christianity has to rely, and other religions too, Islam tends to be this same mindset, so does Judaism, particularly but so many religions around the world kind of expect us to believe things. You've got to believe what we tell you, and if you don't believe it, then you're a sinner, and if you don't, and you believe someone else's beliefs, you're really, really deeply in trouble, aren't you? Because you're back in the wrong side. And this has become really one of the perennial problems of the world, I think, this intolerance that comes often from one religion to another, when people say only my beliefs are true, and obviously as a medium, I believe in what I do, but I prove it. I try to give, when I do my mediumistic readings for people, for example, I try to give you information, tell you things that I couldn't possibly know. And that gives a proof of life after death, and it gives a proof of the continuation of life. I don't think it gives a proof of God, because I had an argument with Richard Dawkins about this. It doesn't prove God, what I do, but it does make you think about the continuation of the human personality after death. And at the very least, it would make you think about the existence of telepathy, if that could account for it. But that's another issue. So there's been kind of a checkered history between religion and spiritualism, which of course gathered together all the mediums. The mediums all got together and formed the Spiritualist National Union in the UK, and various other ones in America and in Canada, and to a lesser extent in Australia. And these organisations had to battle to be able to do what we do. Up till 1954, it was illegal for people like me to do mediumship, and that's not long ago. I think it was 1954. And I'm slightly out. I think it was 1952, but it was something like that. It was very close to when I was born, actually. But it was illegal. People like Helen Duncan, who was a medium, got arrested and put in jail and you could burst into spiritualist meetings and arrest them for doing these things, particularly within the Second World War, because there was things being leaked that seemed to be making predictions about battleships going down that happened and came true and nobody knew it. That's one of the Helen Duncan things, Barnum and so forth. That's the wrong name for it, but so at one point actually Christianity started to look into it and see is this a load of nonsense, or is this really, are these people really communicating with the spirit world? There was a Bishop of Canterbury in the UK. His name was Cosmo Lang, and I think it was in 1939, he commissioned a report from the Archbishop of Bath and Wells. And they did a report and sent a whole team round of different types of people. Psychologists, I think, were included, and all sorts of people to see, interviewing people that had been to spiritualist churches and done mediumship and involved in it. And so, is there anything really in this? They brought their conclusions to Cosmo Lang, and these conclusions were immediately suppressed. They were leaked, and it got out to the spiritualists, but they were leaked. And in actual fact, it meant that the church had actually found that the idea of communication with the spirit world did seem to have merit to it. There was an actually, I've got the text there. Thinking about it, I forgot to bring that over. I've got a bit of what they actually said in the report. It said, when every possible explanation of these spirit communications has been given and all doubtful evidence set aside, it is generally agreed that there remains some element as yet unexplained. We think that it is possible that the hypothesis that they proceed in some cases from discarnate spirits is a true one. So that was a report from Cosmo Lang, the Archbishop of Canterbury, in 1939, and that was suppressed. They were basically saying, listen to it again, the last bit, that some cases from discarnated spirits is a true one. Now that was bombshell at the time, because nobody except the church is allowed to actually make any communication with God. If you start getting people like me and other mediums giving messages from the afterlife, then we've lost control of it all. You see, the church, right back in 325 AD, at the Council of Nicea, under the auspices of the Emperor Constantine, and what was his name of the bishop? Sylvester, the Bishop of Sylvester, not one with Tweety Pie, but they got together and said, look, we're going to have to work out a few things. The most importantly is Jesus, for example. Was he born? Is he a man, or is he a god? And they started that type of argument. But also they went through in Nicaea and other great sort of come together again. What was the other one called? Corinth and other ones, or Constantinople. I think it was Council of Constantine. I'm not a historian, but they all kind of got together and said, we're going to have to chuck out anything we don't believe in, And in fact, the whole thing with these early ideas, they threw out everything. What we're left now with Christianity, and these Christians that come and condemn us, we're left with an absolute skeleton of what there was before. If you look at things like the Gnostic texts, I don't know if any of you guys have looked at the Gnostics, but they were sort of ideas that we could have direct communication with God, that God could live in our life. You look at we went down the catacombs, and in the catacombs there's paintings on the wall, and there was hints of it about the idea of communicating with the dead and things like this, mediumship implied in it. And and even reincarnation, was part of the Jewish faith at that time before when Jesus walked the earth, because they believed that, for example, John the Baptist, when he met Jesus, and Yogananda's made some interesting references to this, but they believe to be the incarnations of Elijah, who would have been John the Baptist, and Elisha, who would have been Jesus, who they said knew each other in previous life, and John the Baptist was the guru of Jesus. So real contentious stuff But that's how Yogananda put it. And when you look at it carefully, you think, yeah, there's lots of references when you read the text that seem to suggest that, they lived before, they were reincarnated, they came together, and just like Eastern teachers, they taught each other and helped towards their self-realization and the self-realization of others. In fact, Jesus wasn't even really a Christian, was he? He was born a Jew, he lived a Jew, and he died a Jew. He never set up any religion himself, and I don't think he had any real intention to sort of set up a religion himself, really. He was he a lot of the ideas that we've got that were pushed into Christianity, all about the ideas of a Christ, for example, were brought in by St. Paul, because he was a Roman, but he was a Roman that believed in this religion of Mithraism, in which the idea of the Christ was very much a part of it. I mean, lots of holy men at the time of Jesus were called the Anointed One, which means the Christ, so he was one of the anointed ones, many, So when the old Christians come at me and have a go at me, like if we get the born again Christians, or we get the Mormons, or we get any of the others knocking my door, I'm usually up for a pretty good argument with them, and the problem is they tend to come back again. But what are your thoughts on this, guys? Because isn't it about time that now that mediumship is being much more accepted into the mainstream than it ever was? Me and Jane, when we were first working on television, we were not allowed to demonstrate mediumship on television through pretty much all of our lives as mediums. We'd go onto television, we'd even had stuff filmed, we were doing the same sort of stuff as John Edward and things did, and it was all pulled because you weren't allowed to do it, because it broke the laws at that time. And they're still there, actually, on mainstream television. You still can't demonstrate mediumship on BBC TV, for example, or ITV or Channel 4, not without having some skeptic tearing it to bits or questioning it all the time. You can't just demonstrate it as it is, because that was the rules. It was those rules, particularly the rules in the UK, were made by the BBC mainly, and the BBC thought, well, who's going to make the religious rules? I'm calling the Christians, so they said, we're not allowed to have Islam, we're not allowed to have mediumship, and of course it changed, but mediumship was necromancy. So I'm a necromancer, I'm not a medium. That's a nice word, it's a necromancer. You're calling the dead, you're challenging the world by pulling the dead spirits to talk to you, and all that negative nonsense. So those are some of my thoughts, actually, that I thought I'd start off with a talk today, because it's about time, isn't it, that we, I talk about the importance of people coming together, seeing the unity of things, seeing the unity of religion, for example. There's only one religion, the religion of love. That all the religions have that at heart. They should have, but then it's just like what happens with our world today, isn't it? It gets hijacked by people that want power. This, it's yesterday's religion was today's Facebooks and Googles and the rest, and the big corporate organizations. It was the religion that ruled the world. So the priests got in there and started controlling it all, with all their bad values. Same to today. A few try to control it all. A few try to control the background of our world, in our politics, and pretty much everything that's out there is controlled often by a few little people, And I think it's time, don't you, that we started to see a bit more tolerance towards mediumship, that we should be able to see it as something mainstream. We should see it as something that's normal. I mean, you only need to look at Wikipedia and you'll see that the Richard Dawkins type people, the psychop type people, have taken every single reference to any form of ESP, telepathy, mediumship, psychic stuff, and everything's got caveats on it about this is unproven pseudoscience. Is it pseudoscience when you've had your life strongly influenced by something that is proven to you, given you proof as from mediumship? It can't be classed as a pseudoscience. I mean, one way of taking it, I mean, there's a great guy out there, there's a lovely book by Victor Zammit about a lawyer presents the case for the afterlife. It's worth a look if you want. He talks about, he was a lawyer, and he says, well, basically, if you take all the evidence You take it all as a whole. You take the evidence of life after death from things such as near-death experiences, from mediumship. You take it from dreams. You take it from coincidences. You could look at all the books from the past, for example, such as, well, I've got one by the side of me. What was it? The Phantoms of the Living, a really lovely old ancient book. One of my favorites, that one, actually. All those type of books. And the evidence that's been accumulated over the many years now, almost centuries, get into, take it all as a whole, and we have a case proven. You could hang a person on the same sort of evidence we've got, if it was that way. So, it's time, I think, we had tolerance in there. It's time we started to say, right, mediums are acceptable people in societies. They're not pariahs. They're not people that any old comedian can have a go at. They're not people that you immediately assumes a fraud, and give us a chance to prove our worth a little bit more. I say I'm really pleased, frankly, that we've got YouTube, because I can talk to people like yourselves, and we can share these ideas. But it wasn't long ago we couldn't share any of this. Right, that's my blurb for today. I'll take a few questions from you now, guys. So let's have a look what you've been going on. I'm running it myself today. I haven't got Domenico helping me out today. So all, again, questions about topical things. Anything in here about on the topic? How did Mother Mary get pregnant with baby Jesus? If people still believe she was a virgin, then that's why the church talked down to us. Yeah, I'm obviously doubtful about that one. But then at the same time, I have seen miraculous things with various holy men that I've seen in my time. And I believe that certain holy miracles can happen. And I, much as I've sort of attacked Christianity there in some ways, I'm quite willing to believe that Jesus walked on water, because there's been many others that have done that as well. But I don't think he was the only one that walked on water. And maybe I've seen and heard of mediums who reproduce food. Maybe on the Sermon on the Mount, which I think is one of the few talks of Jesus that was actually truly his words, unedited. But there, I think when he produced the bread and fishes, maybe people were sharing stuff, but maybe something was happening there, because there's things like that have happened. Many stories of things like that, and I think I think those things could be true. Christ is the Greek translation of Messiah. Yeah, yes, that's true as well. And I think the whole thing is, you see, when you get someone like, say, a Messiah, it's very similar to the idea of an avatar or a great teacher of some sort, isn't it? They take us, the one that will take us to the Godhead. But it doesn't mean to say there's only, I think everything falls down when you say my way is the only way. There's no other way, and then you become intolerant to other religions. I mean, I was talking the other day about Islam. Islam and Judaism and Christianity, most people don't realize that they got pretty much all the same sort of roots to them. They all got the root of Abraham's religion, and just people that argue about themselves. It tends to be that you get some sort of great teacher, don't you? And then everybody kind of starts to split it up and say, no, this is the way to interpret it. No, this is the way. So you get splits. So in Islam, you get splits. In Christianity, you get major splits, Catholicism and Anglican and all the rest of it. And even in Hinduism, you've got the same idea of lots of splits. Those that believe that they're non-dualism and dualism, there is no self, and those that say there is a self, there is an Atman, there is no Atman. And then even Buddhism that says, well, there's no God at all, it's just your consciousness. So again, we make such a mess of it all, don't we? The church has evolved now. They believe in gender fluid children. Really? I don't know. Is that true? Eye of the needle? I mean, I wouldn't have thought they'd been that tolerant to that idea. But we certainly need tolerance of our thinking, and we need to modernize our thinking. I think I tend to think there's only two genders. Actually, it strikes me that's why I find it hard to see differently. But I in a physical sense, certainly. So I don't know. The church needs to evolve. It certainly needs to clean its act up. I think, I think in a lot of respects, one of the, we've had so many sort of horrible things happening in Christianity, particularly the Catholic Church, with all the abuse of children and things that have happened. But really, I think it would soften things a lot if we had more women in the movement. It would soften things a lot if we're not. And gender fluid people too. I mean, people openly gay would be perfectly all right in any religion I see. But we need more tolerance there too, don't we? And I think if we had more women in it, and we were a little less harsh on the men, saying that they got to be completely, they've got to give up sex altogether. I mean, that's not particularly going to be very good, because as Freud showed, even though many of his ideas are wrong, but he did show that, you start repressing these things and they turn into all sorts of ugly stuff. Yeah. So let's have a look what else you've got here. I'll pick a few other ideas up now, and we'll see what other things we got here. Bear with me, guys. I'm just going to have a quick look. We are thinking about doing something on Jack the Ripper. Actually, we talked to a good friend who wanted to do that with us. We should pick up on that again. I just click on a few things as I look through. Nope, he's not going to be freed. Nope, Julie. And I thank you for. I think Julie, you said you joined as a patron today. Thank you very much for joining as a patron. No, I don't see him as being freed, even though, we've got the whole new thing with the laptops, haven't we? And with the Biden business and Hunter Biden's laptop. I mean, if that hadn't been released, how do you challenge your authorities? And the same thing with Julian Assange. I think the guy's, to me, he comes across as very arrogant and things, although he looks pretty shattered now, perhaps a bit naive, thinking he could get away with just publishing stuff. But in many respects, I think he should be freed. I mean, the guy blew the whistle, but there's we do have whistleblowers. Who decides what should be secret? Who's it protecting? If it's protecting the country as a whole, well, then these things are probably good. But if they're protecting people, and also, with this type of thing, I don't know how you feel about this, people, but I mean, all this business where you get stuff hidden away in Panama, for example, we had recently, didn't we? I mean, why should people be able to keep stuff secret in secret vaults, people that can keep vast wealth hidden away, and all the cultures of the world? Should it be allowed that anybody could keep a famous painting hidden in a vault and only they see it? These things belong to humanity, not to individuals. I mean, that's really, really bad. Also, that looks an interesting one. I haven't read it properly. Something rude, I hope. My parents were both mediums. My mother used to take me to a village near just outside London that had a ducking pond and stocks. She told me that if we lived, they used to burn the witches, didn't they? And they used to duck the witches and the mediums, because the witches and the pagans were the first mediums. And I'm surprised that if mediumship is genetic, it ever survived, because I don't think it's genetic. But how would it have ever survived with all these people being wiped out with such intolerance and dreadful? And even to this day, I mean, not so bad now, but it was really, really difficult for me and Jane, as I said at the beginning. When we first started out as mediums, we had to keep it really quiet. I mean, I was a single parent before I met Jane, bringing my first daughter up from a baby. And because I was a man on my own, bringing a child up, which was unheard of in those days, the welfare would want to keep an eye, and particularly since there's been some difficulties. And, so I had to keep it about spiritualism and mediumship, because it was all run, those organizations, by Christians, and often extremist Christians. And so being a medium in those days was bloody difficult. And so I used to go and do mediumship up in London, so I didn't do it in Southampton, where I used to live at the time. I'd drive 100 miles, do the mediumship there, and come back again, so no one would find out. So times have changed a lot, but there's still a lot of intolerance out there. Go and have a look at Wikipedia. You'll see the rubbish that they put on there. What we got here? Another one. Craig, I don't watch TV anymore, and I don't think you should aspire to that. Alternative media is the way forward. Yes, it is, but I think you've got to watch all of it. I think the BBC in particular have come into a right mess of thinking there. I hope the time will come one day, and I'm sad to say this, but the time will come when the BBC is privatized, because how can some of this nonsense they put on us and this skewered sort of ideas ever be taken aboard by people paying for it? You know, would I pay for it? Some of it? No. Would I pay for David Attenborough? Yeah, absolutely. Would I pay for what's the other one I like? Who do you think you are? Yeah, and things like that, and panoramas. Is that BBC? But all those type of things, yes. But some of the idiocy and some of the news and some of the historic stuff now, I wouldn't pay for. So you know, I think mainstream media really should be, people like the BBC particularly should become more accountable. And a lot of the stuff out there, though, of course, is not researched as much as it should be. You know, that's the problem. People get ideas, and you know the way it works with an algorithm. You watch one thing, and it's far right or it's far left, and next thing you're throwing more ideas on whatever you've looked at last, and you begin to think that the whole world works like that because you're seeing what they think you should see. So even the alternative media is skewered in that way. Let's have a look. Oh, interesting one, because I'm keeping more to the mediumistic a bit more tonight. Oh, I like that one too, actually. Just go back to that one. Wikipedia is a pseudo-intellectual cesspit. And that was alternative media originally, wasn't it? What was your first experience of the spirit world, and how old were you? I didn't know it was my first experience, I suppose, but I can remember. I can remember. You see, most of our memories are laid down from about the age of 6. If you think about what you can remember back to, I can remember quite far back into my childhood. I did a lot of meditations in which I would follow my memories back to find as far back as I could remember. It's an interesting meditation to try. How far back can you go? What's the furthest thoughts back? And I can remember I must have been about 2 or 3 years old, playing in my granddad's garden, and there was like a spirit that came round me. Then, and I came running back. I was scared out of my mind because it scared me, but something appeared next to me when I was little, of about 2. And one of the most verifiable ones was when I was I think I was 6 years old, when I saw the spirit of my granddad on the father's side appear in my room, and nobody told me he died. Anyway, so that was that. So I'm just gonna talking about religion again. Will India become a Hindu nation? I think India, well, it is really already a Hindu nation in many ways. The name of the countries, I think it will change. I think it will become, I've said this in my predictions before, that India will change its name to Bharat, which means in my predictions, I'm saying already really that India will become a Hindu nation. But India has also been a very inclusive sort of nation. You know, I mean, Hindu is also another word. What is it? You know, if you go to Tamil Nadu, it's a very different type of belief system or spiritual system as it is if you went up, say, to Rishikesh. They're different ways of thinking, you know, and this whole idea of the Dravidian and things like that. I think how do you define that? I think India is quite a good example of a tolerant nation, actually, when it comes to religion, and it absorbs all the religions. St. Thomas, keeping to the Christian theme, went to India. You know, St. Thomas went to India, and he formed a church there. I think his church is in Kerala side, and there's a very strong, when I went to Kerala, very strong Christian faith there. I was amazed at the number of Christian churches that I saw in Kerala, and a very different view, actually, of Christianity. And I think, you know, this is what I think one of the great things of India is that it kind of is a place where sometimes things can survive, you know. And that's another quite an interesting one on this theme. Thanks, Alexandra. That's a nice one. In some Baptist Christian church in the USA, There are people who speak in tongues. What do you think of that? Well, we had a very similar thing happen in the early days of spiritualism, because the Quakers took on the idea of kind of channeling the spirits. They became the Shakers. And this was kind of a movement, the idea that the spirit can speak through a person. And I think some of the speak in tongues stuff is probably just coming straight from the unconscious mind. Indeed, some of the spiritualist stuff comes straight from the unconscious mind. I mean, I've watched trance mediums talk an absolute load of baloney sometimes, but then other times you hear great things come through and great teachings come through spirit guides. And most importantly, those that go into trance, for example, the only ones I trust, absolutely only ones I trust with that, are those that can give evidence when the trance is happening. So to say, you come into the room and say your name. I say, hello, Craig, it's good to sit down. How did they know my name? That sort of trance is much better than the sort of gobbledygook trance, which particularly took over in America with a lot of the channeling and things as well. So I think the Baptist churches are probably on the wrong path there with it, actually. But perhaps if they were I'm a bit arrogant, but perhaps trained a bit better to understand what is from spirit and what is evidence of spirit, they go a long way. And this is what's such a great shame of it. I said in a talk recently, I said, wouldn't it have been lovely if the churches could become places where people really want to go to sit and meditate and really connect with their spirit, not through belief, not through teachings, not through being told what to do, but a genuine one-to-one connection with the Godhead. And I think, like I said, when I was talking about the Cosmo Lang and everything at the beginning, the church doesn't like the idea that spiritualists, for example, say there's no hell, there's no judgment, there's no redemption. There is, there is redemption in the next life. We get another chance, possibly, says the spiritists, in reincarnation. So that kind of went against all the kind of Anglican ideas of the time, and it's madness, if you ask me, because if they could just take on board this simple idea that some of us can communicate with the spirit world. And it doesn't mean that we're challenging, and it doesn't mean we're turning over the ideas of what the original teachings were of any religion. I mean, they still hold good, they still hold good. But it challenges this idea that it's the only one, is the only way, and that only what's written in my book is the answer. Anything else that comes beyond that is lies. Right. So it means that all the religions that take the idea this is the book of the teachings and that's it, full stop, underlined. I mean, it can't grow, can it? It can't evolve. It cannot become more. And that is the danger, because the world is growing and we need to evolve our way we look at things. As we understand the material world more, we should evolve our religious ideas, surely, too. For example, things like, we've understood the quantum world, that it exists. That ties in very closely with the idea of what the spirit might be. Could science and religion come together one day? But it can't come together if we got these doctrines of evil sort of materialism and evil sort of religion. They've got to be open, loving organizations that can actually see the benefit of each other. And then one day, goodness knows, we might come up with all sorts of interesting ideas in the future. Billy Palmer Music. Speaking of tongues, do you know of mediums who speak multiple languages? Do the dead connect with you always in your language? Well, that's a good one. There's a thing called exoglossy. And this is the idea that you can speak a foreign language without knowing it. And there have been a number of proven cases of it, including someone speaking ancient Egyptian, I believe. I'm not sure the full details of that. I know in my own case, actually, I have spoken Urdu to someone, and I don't speak a word of Urdu, but I was such a deep communication. I wasn't doing trance or anything. I was just doing such a deep communication. I said to the woman, I've got to say this to you. Does it make any sense? And I said, blah, 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 whatever it is. I don't remember it now. And she said, oh, thank you. You're congratulating me on the marriage. And I've just got married. Where did that come from? I think Jane spoke Chinese to someone once, and I've had bits and pieces of Chinese come through too. But when the spirit world communicate, we don't need that. When the spirit world they connect to the part of my brain, as it were, that's pre-language. So they get in before the language bit. So they get in where the first thought comes, the initial, where thoughts arise, as it were. Where do thoughts arise? That's another interesting question. But at that place where thoughts arise, that's where the spirit world put their message in. And then it goes through my brain. So it turns into English language, and then I express it. And on that way, from the pure thought where they drop it into the seed of my consciousness, perhaps the pineal gland in the middle of the brain, possibly. Science could look at that one day, I hope. But somewhere in there, it seeds the thought, and then it got to go through my brain before it's expressed. And en route, it could get distorted. It could be me. I could interfere with it and change it. Or did she say so and so or such and such? You know, is it a John or a George or a you know? You sort of look. So my own brain and can get in the way, and that's why when you develop as a medium, Billy, and I think you're working on that. I get the feeling. You need to allow it to come, just like it does with music. Like Mozart would hear the music and just write it down. He didn't have to do the work, and it's a bit like that with mediumship. We have to get out the way of it so that we can let it come through as a pure channel. And that's why becoming a medium, it's very important, anybody interested out there in becoming a medium, that one of the qualities you have to embrace, I think, is purity, inner purity of thought. You know, I mean, you've got to clear all the bits of you that get in the way, and you've got to be a clear, pure channel. Let's do one more question. That's an interesting question, because I've heard of that before. Is it true that the corners of the eye are more sensitive to seeing psychic activity? Well, I think, Rex, what you're saying there, excuse me, is that it's like your peripheral vision. You're talking about the corners of the eye. I think what you're talking about is peripheral vision. So I'm kind of looking at you, or the camera at the moment. Actually, I'm looking that way, aren't I? But over here, I'm kind of conscious of things. Like if I put my hands over here, I can kind of I can see it on this camera, but I can kind of be aware of it in my peripheral vision that something's going on over here, right? And that's called the peripheral vision, on the edge of your vision here. And a lot of people feel that that here is in this place, is just out the way of the sight, is where you can sense spirit. And where you can sense ghosts, for example, when people do ghost hunting, that's why there's a feeling of something behind me and things. We're feeling it through our peripheral vision. And now I think there's possibly some mileage in that idea, in that the peripheral vision is this here is not in my conscious mind. My conscious mind is here when I'm talking to you, but my unconscious, my subconscious is also picking up all this information around me. It's telling me I'm in a room. It's telling me that there's books behind me and things like that. My peripheral vision is working on an unconscious level. And I think that the spirit world will often come through us. Like I said, it's got to find a channel through. It will often come through us by trying to bypass the rational mind. So it comes in through the unconscious. So when it's coming through the unconscious, that's also the unconscious here, the subconscious behind the scenes, sort of behind us in our peripheral vision. So that's why it feels like it comes through that area, because it's coming through the unconscious. Because this and that, this side and this side, all around the edge of the eyes, are the unconscious vision. So it's through the unconscious vision it comes. Okay, that makes sense. I hope. It was a bit confusing, I think, the way I expressed that there. But anyway, guys, I'm going to say thank you to you all now, and lots of really interesting questions. I haven't done so many topical ones today, but I will do some more of those, of course, because I come on regularly for you and just like to do these Coffee with Craig ones. These always come on spontaneously. But you can, of course, always come and see me and Jane regularly on Saturdays. So we have one Saturday at 7 o'clock every time, and you can speak to me and Jane. You'll also have a look in the description. You'll find Jane's links to her channel too. She's just put another one up today a few minutes ago, so there's just a new video gone up there if you want to watch some more new stuff. And if you're keen, follow, please do. Where is the sign? subscribe. Yes, guys, if you're new to the channel, subscribe. That means you could see us every week, you know, and every time I go live with these new ones. And obviously, and if you're a patron, because the patrons, I always you know, please, those that follow us and help us a little bit in the background, always post up ideas on the patron pages, guys, because I'm always looking for new topics and new thoughts to talk about in some of these Coffee with Craig ones that I'm doing more of at the moment. Okie dokie. Well, I'm going to say goodbye to you all now, and thank you very much for following the channel and being part of all this. See you again very soon. Bye for now. So, would you like to know more? Come and see my website at psychics.co.uk, where you can buy my books. You can also read lots of free articles, and you can join our patron community if you like there. You can also book readings with myself and Jane. I do readings by Zoom and by email. Jane does them one-to-one at home. So have a look on the website, you'll find all that. And you'll also find our team of readers who do international work. So you can book a psychic, a medium, an astrologer there, and they're available now for phone readings 24/7. So visit our website, psychics.co.uk. You'll find a link in the description below.